Hello, it's Brad Laurie of BlockchainBrad. Today I'm honoured to speak with Richard Yang. He is the co-founder of Cocos-BCX, and he's here to give you all an update in everything they've been doing since we last spoke. Rich, thank you very much, mate, for coming on the channel to let everyone know what you've been doing.
Hello, Brad. It's always a pleasure to talk to you.
Likewise, mate. Now, it's quite late for both of us. You're in Beijing, I'm in Australia, but we've both managed to find some time. You've been so busy, mate, with a lot of the things, as I mentioned before. But can we just start briefly with letting people know essentially what you stand for? Your slogan is the next generation of digital economies, specifically with to do with gaming as well. What would you like to say to those people who perhaps don't know anything at all about Cocos-BCX?
Well, just a quick recap. We provide all the necessary components to create games that incorporate decentralized economy mechanisms. Our product mix includes a full functioning blockchain based on Graphene framework, a virtual machine, or what we call a runtime container, and IDE, which is the workstation for game developers. Our token standards Cocos 1808, designed specifically for games, and many other tools.
Got it. Now, that sounded almost rehearsed because you've probably been asked that question so many times, Rich, but essentially, in a nutshell, you're a full stack solution when it comes to a gaming platform. You've built in your own standards. You've got all the different aspects built in so that you can operate independently. So in terms of layering, would you argue that you've got the capacity to be a layer one gaming platform because you have built this from scratch?
Well, actually, I think our product covers different layers. And I think the idea is a little bit different to our peer projects because many of them are trying to move the blockchain gaming from different angles. But to our experience, building a blockchain game is systematic for the developers, and it is not easily to be solved by any standalone product or technology, such what we call a best blockchain or what we call best layer one, a best layer two. So in our view, we develop a separate tool to help the developers build a learning curve. So that's the idea behind that.
That makes a lot of sense. So basically, it's a full suite solution to enable the developers to promptly and rapidly onboard all of the different offerings you have so they can get on with building the utility, creating games so that we can expand this in a decentralized way. Well, let's look at this a little bit more in terms of what you were or what you built Cocos-BCX on. Cocos existed before Cocos-BCX. Tell us a bit about the history and why this matters in terms of trusting, the brand, trusting what you stand for.
Oh yeah, so we belong to the Cocos Game Engine family. So our associated products, Cocos 2DX and Cocos 3D, has been in the market for 10 years. It's one of the two top game engines with 1.3 registered developers all around the world. And we are lucky to have had a number of well-known games developed on Cocos game engines, such as Badlands or some episodes of Angry Bird. So a year and a half ago, my teammate and I, we decided to extend the Cocos engine into the blockchain era, which is we want to build this economic engine for the developers and users to easily incorporate their games with decentralized economic systems.
Okay, so a year and a half ago you started this. Obviously that's a pretty big switch into trying to establish the technology, trying to get the team together. What's the process been like since you made that switch to develop this?
So we started about September 2017. And then in March 2018, we launched the prototype. And then 4 months later, we launched the beta test. So right now we're under this public testing, which we name our testnet as a Rinpoche, which is one of the 8 holy mountains in Tibet. So right now we're accepting different inquiries and requests from the users and developers.
Okay, so there's a lot of interest so far. Are we talking about global interest as well, Richard? In terms of obviously with blockchain and with decentralized technologies, the whole idea is to enable, to be borderless, to enable everybody. So when it comes to Cocos, is this open to everyone or are you focusing on certain regions initially?
You just mentioned a very key belief that we are holding up to, which is we believe an open society or an open platform is the key in the early stage of the industry. So we work with a lot of partners, including a lot of the peer chains. For example, we closely work with Ontology, Neo, Tron, Nebulas to develop the Cocos support for their token standards. Like it's under the Cocos token standard family, but their version of the branch.
Okay.
So also we incorporate, for example, the application deployment SDK onto our creator, which is IDE for Neo for ontology as well. So
right.
That's the point. Yeah.
Okay. Well, those blockchains that you mentioned there, they're layer one prominent blockchains, particularly in the Asian region. Are you also looking at embedding your standards into other blockchains? Perhaps if we talk about Europe, for example, or the US, particularly in that region of Silicon Valley, you're thinking about how you can really expand the potential of this, because obviously these blockchains you mentioned, they're not conditioned by a specific region. That's not how blockchain works. But the team themselves tend to be in the Asian space for the most part. So are you going to really expand the network of chains that can utilize this technology that you're building?
Yeah, well, the few partners we just mentioned was based on some of the commercial agreement that we had been having. But our blockchain also fully support a lot of the Ethereum standards, fully support a lot of EOS standards. So right now, it's not a problem for the developers to develop on Cocos and further to make their products or tokens compatible for those chains as well. So we're definitely gonna, well, actually Cocos Engine was global. So we have no intention to keep that within any geographic area.
Makes a lot of sense. Now, in that context, let's talk users, because you'd know a lot about Cocos prior to blockchain in terms of how well it was adopted, what its reach was, what its user numbers were. How big are we talking, Rich, being able to have that Cocos platform to bring into your own blockchain-centric approach? What is it like to know that you have a brand where you can have use potentially from day one once you have your mainnet, once you're operational later?
Well, I think the brand itself is, I would say, a humbling reference to us. Instead of thinking about just directly introducing those users and developers, I think we have to reprove ourselves by making our product valuable to them. Because let's look at some numbers. We have 1.3 million developers registered on our community before. And also the Cocos network, like the traditional ones, they're hosting probably 800 million devices in the world right now. But instead of just directing them to our platform, I think we need to really, again, build the learning curve. For example, we would maybe not teach, but advise the developers what kind of a game they want to start with. Maybe not the very complicated ones, so the users can easily try out and they can easily produce them. And later on, what is this blockchain mechanism can be a advantage of a game rather than a drawback.
Right.
So things like that, together with our technology and tools and products, we want to be the stepstone for the first stage.
Right.
So yeah. So again, back to the question. I don't think we're gonna just directly reference that 800 million users to our platform, but yeah, it's about, we know how difficult and how hard we should try for that.
Sure, and it's good to know that there is a user base there. It's potential for onboarding, and there's attention that's already built in through the brand. Now, the SDKs, you mentioned, you alluded to toolkits being built in. Can you talk us through the kind of SDKs that you're building now? I understand that you're compatible with quite a few of them. And what does it mean to have these robust SDKs in terms of developers?
Yeah, so just to name an example, a few days ago, we released the SDK. Right now, it's on, by the way, it's on the repository of GitHub. GitHub.
Right.
So it's under the name of Cocos/BCX. So we released the 3 SDKs, which was JavaScript SDK, iOS SDK, and Android SDK. So with those SDKs, the game developers can easily use JavaScript as they used before to program the smart contracts on our blockchain that can be later translated onto other blockchain. So that's a way easier way to use compared to a lot of the a lot of those languages on decentralized systems such as Solidity.
Yeah, and they're actually quite generic as well because it's Java, because it's Android, as you mentioned. Do you think that because you've built out these SDKs on very prominent, with prominent means to do so, are you setting yourself up to be possibly the leading gaming platform? Because developers essentially globally can access your SDKs quite readily now, do you feel you're at the forefront of this kind of gaming revolution?
We try to be, because the idea is, again, to inherit their working habits or their game production habits, and to try to together with them to try out different blockchain games. For example, whether we can provide some tools for them to easily modify their old games and incorporate a little bit of blockchain mechanism, or can we provide an integrated development interface for them just to build a blockchain game from scratch?
Right.
And along with other components such as wallets or like traffic interface, such and such.
Right. Now, Rich, you mentioned before that it's on the GitHub, it's open source, meaning that it's freely accessible. How do you have a system in which you can essentially generate revenue if you're providing all the SDKs, you're providing all the resources to the developer? How do you build a business on that model if you're providing all the tools for free?
Well, the lucky thing is that we have some direct reference to the gaming industry.
Mm-hmm.
So I think no matter how we want to restructure this industry by reallocating interests among the publisher, the user, and developer, but still, I mean, the core value proposition remained the same. So on Cocos blockchain, our business model would be like free plus paid, which is the basic functionalities of the blockchain and components would be absolutely free for use. But some of the advanced contracts or advanced executions or advanced components will be charged.
Okay, so the advanced is the key point to sustaining your own model to be a business, but you also want to provide for the free tools so that people can go and build their own blockchain game to then have all of the digital assets that are, afford for, a quite revolutionary approach, because people can build out a token model. They can allow people to engage in cross-collaborative, events, and the potential is immense with regard to what can be done, but you want to provide that fundamental access and tools for free.
Yes.
Okay, well, let's talk a little bit more about perhaps some of the key features that you've built in. Now, you mentioned one of them before, and that was the tech engine. And if you'd like to know more, obviously, people can go and look into your technical papers. They can look into the website. But you also have this aspect of multi-chains or cross-chains. I want to find out a bit more about what the potential is there with the future of how you could perhaps integrate with, as we were talking about, some other chains and build out more of a DApp ecosystem in that respect with ones we don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, we believe technology serves the business purpose. So in gaming, there are a lot of demands for cross-chain transfer. For example, we play a game on a high-performance chain, but when we get some valuables, we probably want to move the valuables to some more secure chains to store them. So from a tech point of view, because our first version of blockchain is based on Graphene framework, it's by nature a universal exchange gateway. So we also provide the translation of different non-fungible tokens or fungible tokens or smart contracts among different blockchains.
Okay,
so
that's a big deal, because it
yes.
creates interoperability between the non-fungible and the fungible among all the different blockchain layer ones.
Yes.
That you essentially work with.
Yes, and that's also why our partners has been quite accepting to our token standards. They all see the opportunity of a universal exchange. We believe free economy, circulating and flowing economy will be more robust than some closed realm. So that's the idea.
Right. Well, can you give us some names of any ones that perhaps we don't know yet, Rich, with regard to future collaborations, more multi-chain scenarios or more cross-chain scenarios?
Well, actually, we have been, for example, we also have an application team. They have been using Cocos, of course, the beta version of the Cocos-BCX components to make games that can be published on EOS, Tron, IOST, and our own chain at the same time. One program, 4 versions. So in the future, I cannot say like 100% of the programs can be done in this way for now, but in the future, we aim to solve such kind of problems, and we enable the inter-circulation of the items across different chains and the different versions of the one application.
Wow, and because you've designed this to be chain specific, I would imagine that the potential to continue doing so with other chains in the future would be there. And so in that sense, you're agnostic in every way, and you're not specific or to any particular blockchain.
Yeah, we provide different options for developers and users. Ultimately, it's their choice to decide on which blockchain I would like to play that game, or on which blockchain I would like to deploy that game.
Makes a lot of sense. Now, developer friendly, you've alluded to this with regard to the kind of scope you've built in, but with regard to languages as well, as you know, there are certain languages that some blockchains have developed for themselves that you have to go and learn. How accessible have you made this so that the languages can interact, so that onboarding can be quite seamless for different platforms, such as Ethereum that uses its own, for example?
So other than the JavaScript we talked about just minutes ago, we also enable Lua, which is a very popular programming language in gaming, and also C++. We're also looking at other popular languages because what we see gaming is that this is a collaborative, creative job. So we try our best to lower the very basic technology barrier for them.
Right. Well, that's good to know, because once again, it's the core right now for you is to build out your technology with developers, because they're going to be the bedrock initially to build out the ecosystem that really becomes that decentralized gaming platform that is CocosBCX. Now, one of the things that is exciting for you now, Richard, is that you're in this testnet phase. You've launched and you have the Gang Rinpoche, as you mentioned, the reference to the Tibetan mountain. But what does all this mean to have testnet? Why is this so important as you build towards mainnet this year?
Oh, yeah. I think you mean like the meaning behind the Garamboche?
Yeah.
Well, that's a funny story, because we think promoting blockchain games is like climbing mountains. You don't have to be the strongest, you don't have to be the fastest, but you have to be the most strategic person. And also, like, the way you plan your steps is so important, because if you want to survive, you have to calculate your oxygen, you have to not to rush too fast. And also Garamboche, among different holy mountains, Garamboche stands for myth and also happiness. It's just like we were so happy to explore this unknown area. So we want to share that kind of feelings with our community. That's why we named that as Garamboche. So in the future, we're going to name our different versions also by the name of the mountains.
I like it. So you've chosen one. You've got many mountains to go. You want to keep climbing. So I don't want to use this as a bit of a comical analogy, but certainly the suggestions there that you really are building towards this mainnet. So talk us through that with the roadmap. You're in this testnet 1.0 now. It is launched this month. What's your plan, Richard, in terms of the roadmap to lead into mainnet? What do you think will happen as you build?
So we're working on multiple lines of tasks right now. First of all is to launch the testnet and gathering the feedbacks from the community, developers and users. So right now, anyone can look at the performance of the testnet online. It's under this domain name CocosBCX/terminal.com. You guys are welcome to check it out. And number 2 is that we are gradually opening source on GitHub, starting from the peripheral components. And later on, after we launch the mainnet, we're gonna just make it all open source.
Okay.
And number 3 is, while we observe the performance, the technological performance of our blockchain, we're also drafting the very basic economic rules and fundamentals that we're gonna configure that onto our chain. So we have different versions of drafts, and we're gonna see how it goes and probably release that in the next few weeks.
Okay, so that's a lot happening. And I think that's important for us to know because people will need to understand the whole token economic structure, the whole gambit of plans that you have built in so that they can, because obviously right now it's still very much in that speculative frame as well. People are looking into blockchains, they're looking into startups and trying to understand what you stand for. So you're going to be releasing all this information consistently in the next few weeks. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, and we're going to expand our community base. We're right now going to Southeast Asia, and also we're going to Europe. So everyone interested, welcome to join us.
Okay. Well, it sounds like you're building also a strategy to really go global with your efforts to educate about BCX, Cocos-BCX. Now, we discussed some of the technological aspects, but with regard to DApps, I did want to ask you, are you building your own your own games, for example? I know that you are a gaming platform, but is your intention to also have anything in-house that is representative of your own team's work?
Well, we do. The thing is, on one hand, we need to build the models. We need to build a reference for other developers. For example, in-house, we right now have probably 8 to 12 games almost ready. We're going to launch that one by one. So far, we have published 3, but those are very, very basics, just to show the basic functionality of the blockchain. For example, there is a random number game. There is a non-fungible token, non-homogeneous asset game, as an example. But later on, we're going to provide more games, how to make games competitive, fun, at the same time, fully utilizing the idea of blockchain validated assets, for example.
Right. Well, how's that going? You have a lot of developers in-house who are specialists in gaming. Up to date, Rich, we've often seen very watered down efforts, very gambling centric or just very basic gaming that doesn't really go into the detail of the kinds of games that we see are demanded by the consumers. So is the plan to create really detailed, really engaging, and as you said, more importantly, fun, all of the aspects that are required for a really saleable game? Is the plan to create those within in-house with Cocos-BCX?
Well, I think it's an open playground. So we're definitely going to create some games because we want to be the reference. We also need to know like the developers demand always. That's a continuous effort. Yep. So of course, yeah, we're gonna make some games, but we believe there are so many brilliant game developers better than us out there. All we need to do is let them know and get them to try. And if their interest and specialty has any overlap with blockchain game, we're welcome them to be on board.
Right. Now, where are you at with that now? We talked about in-house, but what about those that are already using the code? It's open source now with the SDKs announced. How many have you got onboarding that are actually experimenting with the SDKs and with the code so they can build out their own games? What are the kind of numbers this year?
Yeah, well, by the end of the last year, when we launched the alpha test, we got inquiries and submission of codes by 35 teams. Half of them from Asia, half of them actually outside Asia. But so far, I think I need to double check with the numbers, but I think we have 5,000 registered users that we validated as a real user. So wow. It's only 2 days. It's kind of beyond our expectation.
That's amazing because it really has only been a few days now. Do you anticipate this is going to grow exponentially, given that this has only been days since you launched this aspect? Let's say, we're talking the end of this year even. What's the speed in which this happens? Is it surprising you?
Well, I would say among those 5,000 users, most of them are like developers, I would say. Because right now we don't really have many user-oriented applications.
Sure.
So I think we are, we are really lucky that many people follow and they're willing to try out what we're doing right now.
Yeah. And what about the capacity of the actual full stack system that you built in? Now, if you're already onboarding several thousand potential developers and it's only been a very short period of time, clearly there's there are going to be a lot more coming. There's a huge wave of developers, no doubt, in the future. Have you got a full stack system to cope with that in terms of security, in terms of scalability? You're going to need those the capacities built in to prove that there's no bottlenecks in the future.
Well, just to be totally fair and honest, I think we're ready for any crashes or errors or things that we need to correct, because there's no system is perfect and we're still under the testing mode. But so far, I think we haven't been encountering any major error or mistakes on our blockchain. And we can see from like online that we can see the live block production log. So it's actually operating at a better performance than we expected.
Right, so you stress test this, and that's what's really important. Now your terminal, can you just give us a little bit more information, because that's been released recently. In a nutshell, how would you explain what the terminal is all about for those who don't know anything about it?
Well, terminal, we can consider that as a main page of the Facebook of our Cocos interface. For developers, you can see all your tools and all your assets. For users, of course, assets and the performance of the whole system, everything. It's a dashboard.
Right. And it's all ready to go. The interface is there.
It's already online. It's already live. It's going to be visual and better presented in the next version.
Okay, so there's iterations to come. When can people start to really see these developments as you start to showcase what the terminal can really do?
Well, the terminal is already online, so. Yeah.
But as you build this out, Rich, and you build out, improvements, I'd imagine that you're going to release this pretty soon, these updates?
Oh, yeah. Within weeks.
Okay, well, that's exciting. Now, I have noticed that you have several papers available. If you're a technological person, if you love tech, there's certainly means in which you can engage with the technological white paper, or the technical one rather. There's more literature that's been published. You've also been big on publications as well, Richard, through Medium. What would you like to say to those people who want to endeavour to read more up on what you stand for? If they want to go and do further research.
Well, I think there are a few personal recommendations I would make. Number one is do not consider gaming as a pure technology play. What we're doing here is we assemble different advanced technologies to support the economic behavior in the game. Number two is that we're trying to use a institutionalized effort inherited from our past experience. Work with the major developers or work with the independent developers. Those are like trying to build business models and again, early stage step ones.
Makes sense.
Yeah, so when we read the technology or when we read everything on Medium or any, for example, short articles I write about the game economy, let's keep that in mind. That would be really helpful, and we're going to enjoy that.
And I think the key word there was the fact you're building out an economy. Now, in that respect, we have this really interesting word called utility that comes out quite a lot in blockchain. Now, Rich, how would you explain to those people when they're going through the literature, they're reading about you, all your writing and what you stand for, when you stand up and say, we have a utility token that's the core of what we do, how would you further explain that? And given that there is some ambiguity right now, given that there is, this sense of fundraising for many projects as well. They're trying to raise capital to build this out. You've already gone through those processes before. You're now really trying to educate people about what this is about as a true utility model. What would you like to say to those people to really empirically, evidence that this can be done as a true, real, and longitudinal utility?
Yeah, I think that's application specific. For our project, we work on gaming, which has, again, very direct and straightforward reference from the conventional gaming industry, because digital gaming is $130 billion US market a year. If we suppose that 20 to 40% of the games can somehow use blockchain mechanism, so that comes up with almost 30 to 45 billion US dollars per year. So that's the value of the decentralized gaming economy. So in that economy, everything is created online. We can say that, used online, disposed online. So if we are proposing an alternative circulating media, other than, for example, fiat money.
Mm-hmm.
That makes sense because the whole value chain can be somehow represented by that medium.
Okay, so you're really, basically in a nutshell, you're saying that you have a system in which the fundamental unit of account is a true utility that will essentially represent the means in which your whole economy can flourish, can exist, interact. We can transfer value, but fundamentally these units are about use. They're about working within the ecosystem.
Yeah, it's based on a true underlying industry or true underlying value to the users.
Right. Well, let's harp back to a year and a half ago when you started thinking about this. You needed capital. You raised money. Can you give us a bit of a recap on how much you raised, whom you raised with, and did you vest that with those parties, with the VCs, for example? What actually took place?
Well, we had 2 rounds of funding. The first one was back in April 2018. Right. Second round was August 2018. So together we raised about 40-something million US dollars equivalent of tokens. And we were very lucky to have the best investor base, I think even worldwide. The key supporters include, for example, Binance Labs, of course, and the New Global Capital. And
so
also
you've got some big names in there. Often they tend to invest substantially. But my understanding, having done some research, is that you have quite a few investors at that level. Quite a few VCs are involved. So are you confident that you've done the right thing in having a substantial number so that you don't have too many, too great of a stake invested with one party?
Well, I cannot talk too much about the details, but I think we have a very diversified investor base. And those key stakeholders, they are long-term investors. So I think we're quite lucky to having been working with them. Yeah.
Got it. So 40 mil, you raised that. Back in that time, that wasn't by any means the largest kind of raise, but it was still, a good quality raise. So kudos to you for achieving that. Now, what about the means in which these are locked or not, and whether they're vested over time? I mean, we hear the narratives of lockups as a term. Did you make sure that there was some sort of means in which you built that into the contracts?
Yeah, we haven't built anything in the contracts yet because we haven't generated any tokens. All the vesting and locking up schedule is totally public in our white paper in section 4 or section 5.
Okay.
So we're gonna vest and unlock those investors once we generated the token. Yeah.
Okay, well, that's good to know. Now let's move across to more of the public access. Now, this is going to be a tough question for you. Now, right now in 2019, the absolute buzzword when it comes to the speculative industry or the speculative aspect of crypto is the IEO. Everyone's talking about it. What are you thinking? Are you considering something like that, or are you considering launching in such a way where you're going to a top exchange? What's going on, Rich? What's happening from the co-founders thinking? And that's you. We wouldn't know, but you certainly do.
Well, purely on my own behalf, not representing Cocos, I think IEO is a good way to get traction. Because we have been experiencing some of the downturns over the last few months. So I think it's quite interesting to have a way to revitalize the users, getting their attention onto those really quality projects. So I think IEO per se, it's a good thing.
Okay.
But for us, I think we remain open, and we don't. Yeah, we have nothing to comment on that.
So you're playing it really safe.
Or not. No.
Okay. Right. Well, having researched you though, clearly you represent some of the top tech in your industry, specifically in the gaming sphere. So are you currently talking to some of these top exchanges at the very least? Let us know more of that. Clearly Mainnet's coming this year. You'd obviously want to be listed at some point this year, I would imagine. Tell us, what the process is. Are you talking to some of these big names? Like, for example, some of them I'm thinking of, BitMax is well-known top tier or tier 2 exchange. Then there's Bitfinex, Bittrex, Binance. We have OKX, KuCoin, all of these. Are you talking to any of these or all of these?
Well, we have been approached by some, and we also have some of the investors, because other than Binance Labs, OKEX is one of our early supporters. We appreciate their support a lot. But mostly we learn how this market operates, rather than talking about any listing or things like that. So absolutely, it's in our plan. But so far, again, I would, let's keep it for the next time.
Got it. Well, it sounds like you have the options open though, Richard. It sounds like a lot of them are coming to you and wanting to have a discussion at the very least, and that puts you in a good position. It certainly allows you to negotiate, to discuss. So it will be really interesting to see how this unfolds. Can we go to the mainnet discussion for a moment? When's that basically planned for in this roadmap?
Since we have already started the public testing, the mainnet should be online absolutely in this year, but it's just a matter of which month. Right. I mean, so far the testnet has been going all right. So yeah, I think maybe Q3, Q4, that's the plan.
Right. Well, having been around for a while, it seems like there's a lot going on between now and then with regard to listings, with regard to mainnet. There's a lot happening. I'm really looking forward to finding out more of that, quite sincerely, and I'm sure everyone else is wanting to know more of that. I would imagine people will be writing in your Telegram very soon. We see all those kinds of comments, but you're not budging. You're not giving that away. And I respect that. Now, with regard to enterprise, partnerships, business deals, given that you're in a vertical that there's a huge amount of money, billions of dollars in this vertical, are you signing up in partnerships in any way to really build out the brand of CocosBCX so that you can substantiate and evidence real enterprise growth?
Well, actually, we have been in talk with so many industry flagships. I am not, so I don't have the authorization to speak out because of the confidentiality issues.
Sure.
The thing is that our team has worked with all the major game developers, all the major publishers in the world, all the advertisement networks. Not just know them, but work with them. Because like the Cocos team used to be one of the major publishers in China. So I think everything is in place. It's just a matter of we can provide a working product that really get them going. It's not about relationships. It's not about anything like incentive. It's just like we need to work with them on how to make blockchain game valid or making sense.
Right, and once you have the mainnet, that's going to be even more reason for the PR to connect with that. So have you got a marketing strategy to couple or to complement your unfolding as a fully functional mainnet system where developers are interacting? Even now they are. So how do you get people to know about CocosBCX?
I think the best way, one is from marketing, absolutely. And we're right now expanding our user base exposure. We're going to Southeast Asia. We're going to Central Eastern Europe within the next few weeks. And also, I think the best way is to actually provide some of the working games that are fun to the users, not necessarily heavily valuable, but definitely it's a fun game without too much barrier to register and play. So by providing popular games, that will be another interesting angle.
Right, and I've noticed that you also recently spoke at Consensus with Ivan on Tech, and you've had subsequent discussions. Clearly, some of the other content creators are really paying attention to you, some of the biggest in the space. That seems really exciting as well, because you're capturing the attention, you're piquing the interest of many people in this domain. Is that because you're doing something that's leading the way in this? Are you really starting to pick up the attention of those people wherever you go? Are you finding that?
Well, I think most people would give us some initial credit based on what we have been doing on Cocos 2DX and 3D. But again, we are ready to restart everything and reprove ourselves. So we do appreciate those credits, but we're trying our best not to let them down.
Absolutely. Well, mate, it's been a really great interview. I sincerely have learned even more since we last spoke. And for those who'd like to know more, please don't hesitate to contact the Telegram to all the guys. They're available on Twitter. There's information below on their Medium blogs. You can obviously contact Richard as well directly. If you're lucky, he's extremely busy. But Richard, I'd like to thank you sincerely for letting us know, most importantly, what you're doing right now. The SDKs are really exciting. The developers can access the testnet. You're moving towards Mainnet. I am going to guess and put it out there that exchanges are coming, and I'm guessing some big ones are coming because you're already well known. You have a significant brand. You're very much well respected with a lot of the people I'm talking to. So I wish you all the very best. Is there anything you'd like to say to everyone on behalf of your team for those, just to finish off in the interview?
Well, just we're so grateful to anyone who are interested to us and has been following us. So together, we're going to the next stage.
Absolutely. Well, I wish you all the best, mate. We'll catch up again soon and we'll break down some of the aspects of your platform then so that it's a little bit more bite-sized and not such a long interview, but I really do appreciate it. It's late for both of us. And for those who, be able to learn a bit more, that's the idea of it. It's an update for CocosBCX so that you can be informed as we move along in this very exciting space called the crypto space. So thanks, guys. And thank you very much, Richard.
Thank you so much, Brad.
You're welcome.